3 men wearing jackets with "police" printed across the back were trying to jimmy open the door of my Jeep Wrangler with a slim metal rod. One of them turned and shouted toward my house. "HOA, order, this vehicle is in violation. Owner needs to come out now." I sat perfectly still inside the Jeep, my hand moving to flip the switch on my 360-degree dash cam, then tapped send on the pre-typed message on my phone, "They're here." The lead guy's eyes found mine through the driver's side window. He flinched. I smiled coldly, leaned back in my seat, and waited. Not for them to break the lock, but for what was about to happen next, something Denise Hargrove had absolutely no idea was coming. She thought she could use fake cops to steal my Jeep for her spoiled son. But today, she'd just walked into a trap set by someone she should never have messed with. Comment where you're watching from, because this story is about to get wild. It hadn't started here, though it began 2 weeks earlier. That's when this nightmare kicked off, though I didn't recognize it as a nightmare at first. Just seemed like typical HOA nonsense, the kind of petty power trip garbage that makes homeowners across America want to burn their CCNR. My name is Trevor Hudson. I'm 41 years old, retired early from the Secret Service after taking a bullet during a presidential detail in Atlanta. The injury wasn't career-ending, but it gave me enough disability and pension to step back, do some private security consulting, and actually live my life. I bought a house in Meadowbrook Estates 3 years ago, nice neighborhood, mature trees, good schools, even though I don't have kids. And I restored a 1985 Jeep Wrangler CJ7 from the frame up. That Jeep was more than metal. It was my proof that I could rebuild myself. Forest green, tan soft top, parked on the street in front of my house because my garage was full of tools and project materials. Completely legal, the street was public property, no posted restrictions, no fire hydrant within 50 feet. I'd checked. Old habits from my federal days: always know the rules before someone tries to use them against you. Then 2 weeks ago, I found a letter taped to my front door. Official HOA letterhead, signed by Denise Hargrove, board president. Violation notice: vehicle parked on street for more than 48 consecutive hours. Fine $500. Compliance required within 72 hours. Old instincts kicked in. I checked the bylaws, state code, everything. She had no authority. No rule about 48-hour parking limits existed in our governing documents. No street parking restrictions at all, except during snow emergencies. And we hadn't had snow in 8 months. So I sent Denise Hargrove a polite email requesting the specific bylaw citation. Her response came 6 hours later. The rule was passed at a recent board meeting to maintain community standards. Compliance is mandatory. No meeting minutes, no bylaw reference, just vague authority claims. According to Virginia state law, any change to HOA governing documents requires written notice to all homeowners at least 30 days before a vote, and the results must be recorded and distributed. I replied, pointing this out. Denise didn't respond, but 3 days later, I got a second letter. Final notice: failure to comply will result in vehicle impoundment at the owner's expense. I stood on my front porch holding that letter, and for the first time, I felt something shift in my gut. This wasn't about parking rules. Something else was going on. That same afternoon, I ran into my neighbor Walter Price. Walter is 70 years old, a retired state judge, and lives 2 houses down with his wife, Martha. He was checking his mailbox when I walked over and showed him the letters. Walter's face went tight. "Trevor, I need to tell you something. Denise Hargrove has been harassing us for 3 years. She wants us to sell our house, says it's bringing down property values because we haven't renovated the exterior." He continued, his voice dropping lower. "We've refused. She's used HOA violations, anonymous complaints to the county, and even had someone try to serve us papers claiming we violated a noise ordinance we'd never broken. It only stopped when I threatened to file a formal bar complaint against her for harassment." He paused, glanced toward Denise's house at the end of the cul-de-sac. Her son Kyle drives a beat-up Porsche 944, same model year as your Jeep. I've seen him staring at your Wrangler. Be careful, Trevor. Denise doesn't stop when she wants something. And that boy of hers, he's worse. I thanked Walter and went home. Sat in my kitchen and thought it through. A fake parking violation. A threat to impound my vehicle. A spoiled kid driving a clapped-out Porsche who kept eyeing my restored Jeep. The pieces were forming a picture, but I needed more information. That night, I installed 2 additional cameras around my property, one covering the street where the Jeep was parked, one covering my driveway. Motion activated, cloud backup, timestamp down to the second. Then I called an old friend from my federal days. Detective Lisa Monroe, Virginia State Police, Public Corruption Unit. We'd worked together on a protection detail for a senator 5 years back. She owed me a favor. Lisa, hypothetically speaking, if someone were to impersonate law enforcement officers to seize private property, what kind of charges would that carry? Her answer was immediate. Federal crime. Impersonation of a federal officer under Title 18. Section 912. 3 to 5 years minimum. Why are you asking? Trevor. I told her I'd explain soon. She told me to call her the second anything happened. I promised I would. 1 week passed. Then, yesterday morning, I found a third letter. This one was different, printed on cheap copy paper, not official letterhead, shoved under my door instead of taped to it. Final warning, HOA will recover the vehicle this Saturday at 9 a.m. Do not interfere or you will be charged with obstruction. No signature, no official seal. I photographed it, saved it in 3 separate cloud storage accounts, then texted Lisa Monroe. It's happening, Saturday morning. I'm going to need that favor. Her response, I'll make some calls. Be ready. And that's how I ended up here at 8:57 a.m. on Saturday morning. Dashcam recording. Watching 3 fake cops try to steal my vehicle. I was ready. The real cops were, too. The man calling himself Officer Martinez pressed his face closer to my window and rapped hard on the glass. Sir, you need to exit the vehicle immediately. This is official HOA business. His jacket said police in block letters. But everything else was wrong. No badge visible. No duty belt with radio, taser, or firearm. No patrol car, just a white, unmarked van with no plates parked 20 feet behind him. His 2 companions were circling the Jeep now, one trying the passenger door, the other examining the soft top like he was considering slicing through it. I didn't move. Just looked at him with the same expression I used to give White House fence jumpers, calm, measured, and utterly unimpressed. Through the glass. I said clearly enough for my dashcam's audio to catch it. I need to see your badge and the legal impound order right now. Martinez glanced back at his partners. One of them, a heavy-set guy with a neck tattoo visible above his collar, shrugged. Martinez turned back to me. We don't need to show you anything. The HOA has the authority to remove vehicles in violation of community standards. I tilted my head slightly. So, you're not police officers? His jaw tightened. We're authorized enforcement personnel. I smiled. That's not what your jacket says. It says police. Are you law enforcement or not? The silence stretched for 3 seconds. Then Martinez made his first mistake. Look, man, Mrs. Hargrove hired us to handle this. You're gonna get out. Or do we have to drag you out? There it was. Clear admission on camera that they were hired by Denise, not acting under any legal authority. I checked my phone. 9:04 a.m. Right on schedule. I'd spent the last week preparing for this exact moment, the morning after that 3rd threatening letter. I'd driven to the county clerk's office and pulled every public record related to Denise Hargrove and Hargrove Realty. What I found was a textbook extortion scheme. Hargrove Properties LLC, Denise's investment company, had purchased 8 homes in Meadowbrook Estates over the past 4 years. Every single one had been sold by owners who'd left suddenly, and every sale was 15 to 20% below market value. When I cross-referenced the HOA violation records, the pattern became crystal clear. Denise identified properties she wanted, buried the owners in escalating violation notices until they cracked and sold cheap, then bought through her LLC and flipped them for profit. Unauthorized paint colors, lawn maintenance complaints, architectural disputes. One family got cited for a basketball hoop, another for rose bushes. It was extortion wrapped in parliamentary procedure, and she'd been doing it for years. I'd compiled everything: documents, sale records, violation notices with dates, proof of the pattern, and sent it to Lisa Monroe and Walter Price. Walter had confirmed it would hold up in court. Lisa had brought in a federal prosecutor from the Eastern District who'd called it a prosecutor's dream. "Let her make the move," he'd said. "Let her hire fake cops. Let them attempt the seizure, and we'll have her on conspiracy to commit theft by extortion, impersonation of law enforcement, and about 6 other charges." That's when Lisa had made the call that brought 5 SWAT officers to my house at 7:30 this morning. They'd parked 3 blocks away, walked in through my back fence, and set up in my living room with a clear view of the street. The lead officer, Sergeant Booth, had been direct. "The second they claim to be police while attempting to take your vehicle, that's our green light. You stay in the Jeep, don't engage physically, and let the cameras do the work." I'd nodded. Booth had grinned. "Lisa says you're ex-Secret Service. You must really hate HOA tyrants." I'd shrugged. "I just hate people who think they're above the law." Now, sitting in my Jeep with Martinez getting increasingly agitated outside my window, I watched the situation escalate exactly as predicted. The heavy-set guy with the neck tattoo had given up on the passenger door and was walking toward the back of the Jeep with a pry bar. Martinez was on his phone, probably calling Denise for instructions. The third guy, younger and nervous-looking, kept glancing up and down the street like he expected trouble. Smart kid. Trouble was coming. Through my rearview mirror, I saw my front door open just a crack. Booth's signal. They were ready to move. All they needed was one more clear violation. Martinez finished his call and pocketed his phone. His face had gone from frustrated to angry. He reached down and grabbed the door handle of my Jeep, yanking hard. The lock held. He yanked again, harder this time, then slammed his palm against the window. "Last warning. Get out now or we're breaking the window." I raised my phone where he could see it and tapped the screen. "I'm recording everything. You're not the police. You have no legal authority, and you're about to get arrested." Martinez's face went red. He turned to the guy with the pry bar and shouted, "Do it! Break the damn window!" The pry bar came up, aimed at my driver's side window, and that's when my front door exploded open and 5 SWAT officers in full tactical gear stormed out, weapons drawn, voices overlapping in a chorus of command authority. "Police, hands up! Drop the tool! Get on the ground now!" The 3 fake cops froze like someone had hit a pause button. The pry bar clattered to the pavement. Martinez's hands shot up so fast he nearly fell backward. The nervous kid actually dropped to his knees without being told twice. Within 15 seconds, all 3 were face down on my lawn, hands zip-tied behind their backs, while Sergeant Booth read them their rights in a voice that could cut steel. I stayed in the Jeep exactly as instructed, watching through my windshield as the scene unfolded. Lisa Monroe's unmarked sedan pulled up 30 seconds later. She stepped out wearing a state police vest and walked straight to Martinez, who was still face down and sputtering protests. "I want a lawyer. We didn't do anything wrong." Mrs. Hargrove said this was legal. Lisa crouched down next to him, her voice cold and professional. Mrs. Hargrove lied to you. Impersonating law enforcement is a federal crime. Attempted theft is a state felony, and conspiracy to commit both. That's going to put you away for a long time." She stood up, looked over at me through the Jeep's windshield, and gave me a small nod. I nodded back. This was just the opening move. The real game was about to start, and Denise Hargrove had no idea what was coming for her. Booth approached my window and tapped gently. I rolled it down. "Mr. Hudson, you're clear to exit the vehicle. We're going to need your statement and a copy of all your recordings." I climbed out of the Jeep, handed him a USB drive I'd prepared in advance with all the dashcam footage, security camera files, and time-stamped documentation. Everything's on there. Video, audio, timestamps, metadata intact. Booth took it, impressed. "You really were ready for this." I glanced at the 3 men being loaded into the back of a police transport van. "I learned a long time ago, if someone's going to come at you, make sure you're holding all the cards when they do." Lisa walked over, pulling off her vest. "Trevor, we need to talk about next steps. These 3 are going to flip on Denise the second they realize how much trouble they're in, but we need to move fast before she tries to destroy evidence or run." I looked toward the end of the cul-de-sac, where Denise Hargrove's house sat quiet and still. "She's not going anywhere. She still thinks she won." Lisa Monroe made the call from my driveway at 9:47 a.m. I stood next to her, watching as the 3 fake cops were loaded into a transport van, their zip-tied hands behind their backs. Neighbors had started gathering, some on porches, others at the edges of their yards, all watching the spectacle unfold. This was about to become the talk of Meadowbrook Estates, which was exactly what we needed. Lisa lowered her phone and turned to me. "Denise isn't answering. I've left 2 messages requesting she come down to the station for questioning. If she doesn't respond within the hour, we'll go to her." I nodded. She'll respond. She still thinks she can control this. Lisa's expression was skeptical. "You sure about that?" I gestured toward the growing crowd. "This is a small neighborhood. Denise's currency is reputation and control. She'll show up because not showing up means admitting she's guilty." Within 20 minutes, my prediction proved correct. A silver Lexus SUV turned onto our street and stopped abruptly when the driver saw the police vehicles. Denise Hargrove stepped out, dressed like she was heading to a country club board meeting, cream-colored blazer, pearl necklace, shoes that probably cost more than most people's car payments. She walked toward us with the kind of confidence that only comes from years of never being told no. Her eyes swept over the scene: the transport van, the SWAT team packing gear, me standing next to Detective Monroe. Her face remained composed, but I saw the micro-expression shift, jaw tightening, eyes narrowing just slightly. She knew. "Detective Monroe," Denise said smoothly as she approached, "I'm sure there's been some kind of misunderstanding. These men were simply hired to enforce a legitimate HOA violation." Lisa cut her off with a raised hand. "Mrs. Hargrove, I need you to stop talking right now. Those 3 men have been arrested for impersonating law enforcement officers and attempted theft. They've given statements indicating you hired them. You have the right to remain silent, and I strongly suggest you exercise it." The color drained from Denise's face. "If they misrepresented themselves, that's not my responsibility." I stepped forward. "Actually, Denise, it is. Conspiracy to commit a crime makes you just as liable. And let's talk about why you really wanted my Jeep." Her eyes snapped to me, and for a moment I saw pure hatred flash across her face before she smoothed it away. "I have no idea what you're talking about." I pulled out my phone and opened a photo gallery I'd prepared. "Your son Kyle visited 3 different Jeep dealerships in the past month asking about restored CJ7s. One dealer told him a vehicle like mine could sell for $35,000 to $40,000. Kyle drives a Porsche worth maybe $5,000. But if someone gave him a free Jeep through fake HOA authority, that's quite an upgrade." Denise's mouth opened, then closed. She looked at Lisa. This is speculation. I don't have to stand here and listen to this. Lisa's voice was flat. You're right. You can come with me to the station and answer questions with your attorney present, or we can get a warrant. Your choice. Denise straightened her blazer, recalculating. She was smart enough to know she'd lost this round, but arrogant enough to believe she could still win the war. I'll contact my attorney and arrange a time, Denise said finally, but I want it on record that I've done nothing wrong. If Mr. Hudson feels targeted, perhaps he should ask himself why he's refusing to comply with reasonable requests. It was a good try playing the victim, shifting blame, but I'd been waiting for this moment. Actually, Denise, I'm not the only one. I'd already uncovered your pattern forcing families out with fake violations, buying their homes through your LLC below market value, then flipping them for profit. Public records don't lie. Her face went white. How dare you? Property deeds, sale prices, HOA meeting minutes, tax assessments. I continued. All showing a clear pattern. Walter Price has copies, so does the federal prosecutor's office. The silence that followed was deafening. Around us, neighbors who'd been watching from a distance had moved closer. I saw Walter Price standing at the edge of his driveway, arms crossed, nodding slowly. The crowd's energy had shifted confusion, giving way to understanding, then to cold anger. Denise realized it in the same moment I did. This wasn't just about the Jeep anymore. This was about every person she'd bullied, every family she'd driven out, every abuse of power she'd gotten away with because nobody had challenged her. And now, standing in the middle of the street with police surrounding her and her neighbors watching, she couldn't spin it, couldn't control it, and couldn't make it disappear. I want my attorney, she said quietly. Lisa nodded. Smart choice. We'll expect you at the station by 2 p.m. Don't make us come find you. Denise turned and walked back to her Lexus without another word. She drove away slowly, and I noticed her hands shaking on the steering wheel. I watched her taillights disappear around the corner, and for a brief moment, I felt something like satisfaction. Not triumph, just the cold certainty that justice was moving forward. But the feeling didn't last. Something in the way she'd looked at me right before leaving, that flash of cornered desperation, told me this wasn't over. Cornered animals fight hardest right before the end. Walter Price walked over once she was gone. He looked at me, then at Lisa. Trevor, you asked me earlier about the 8 families. There's actually more. I've been keeping records for 4 years. It's not 8 families, it's 14. Lisa's eyebrows rose. You have documentation. Walter nodded. Names, dates, violation notices, everything. I was a judge for 30 years. I know how to build a case. I was just waiting for someone brave enough to stand up to her. The number hit like a physical weight. 14 families. 14 lives disrupted, homes sold under duress, savings lost. And Denise had walked away from every single one untouched, protected by the assumption that HOA authority was legitimate even when it was criminal. Until now. I shook Walter's hand, but I didn't feel victorious. I felt cold and focused, like I was back on a protection detail waiting for the next threat to emerge. Because I knew Denise Hargrove wasn't done. She still had one move left, the one where she tried to drag everyone down with her, or burned everything trying, at 1:15 p.m. Lisa Monroe called. She's here with 2 attorneys. I'm making an exception you can watch from observation, but you don't interfere. 20 minutes later, I was standing behind a one-way mirror, watching Denise Hargrove sit rigidly between her legal team in interview room 2. Her hands were clasped so tight her knuckles had turned white. Lisa entered with State Prosecutor Catherine Webb, a woman with a reputation for dismantling white-collar criminals with surgical precision. Webb carried a tablet and a thick folder. She sat down across from Denise and her attorneys Douglas Kern, criminal defense, and Rachel Frost, HOA law specialist. The game was about to begin. Webb opened with a photograph of the 3 fake cops. Denise claimed she'd maybe seen them around the neighborhood. Kern tried to deflect, saying his client had no obligation to discuss individuals she may or may not know. Then Webb laid it all out in one devastating presentation: bank records showing Denise withdrew $2,000 3 days before the incident, a receipt from Sentinel Protection Services for $1,500 with her signature, text messages from her phone to Martinez instructing him about the Saturday 9 a.m. timeline and telling him to do whatever it takes, and sworn statements from all 3 arrested men confirming she'd hired them and specifically told them to look official and wear gear that makes you look like cops, because the target was ex-federal law enforcement. The metadata was verified. The evidence was certified. 3 witnesses were ready to testify. It was airtight. Kern asked for time to review. Webb denied it. Everything was already verified. Denise's voice shook as she tried to claim she never told them to impersonate police, just to handle it professionally. That's when Lisa hit her with Martinez's sworn statement, quoting her exact words about making them look like real cops to intimidate me. The room went silent. I could see Kern and Frost exchanging glances. They knew this case was already lost. Then Webb delivered the second wave. She presented documentation of the pattern: 14 families over 4 years, all receiving escalating HOA violations, all selling within 6 months. 12 properties purchased by Hargrove Properties LLC at 18% below market value. Property records, violation notices, sales contracts, a clear, undeniable pattern of extortion wrapped in parliamentary procedure. When one homeowner refused to break, Denise escalated to fake cops and attempted theft, conspiracy charges stacked on top of fraud, abuse of fiduciary duty, and impersonation of law enforcement. Kern tried to negotiate. Webb made it clear: cooperate and accept responsibility, or face the full weight of overwhelming evidence. No deal made this disappear. Then Denise broke. Her face crumpled. Tears streamed down her cheeks. The carefully maintained facade of the untouchable HOA president shattered in an instant. "I just wanted to help Kyle." Her voice was barely a whisper. "He wanted that Jeep so badly. He said it wasn't fair that he had to drive that terrible Porsche while someone like Trevor had something so nice. I thought if I could just get it for him." Kern tried to stop her, hand on her arm, but the confession was already on record. Rachel Frost stared at her client in horror. Webb nodded slowly, told Denise she'd give her time to consult with her attorneys, and stepped out. Lisa followed, and they both entered the observation room where I stood. "Well," Lisa said quietly, "full confession, better than expected." Through the glass, Denise was crying openly, her attorneys speaking to her in urgent, hushed tones. Webb looked at me. "Mr. Hudson, based on what just happened in there, I'm confident we'll have full cooperation by the end of the day. Denise Hargrove is going down." I watched the broken woman through the mirror, someone who'd believed for years she was above consequence, now facing the reality that power built on corruption was just smoke. Justice was done. The evidence had spoken. The system had worked. But something cold settled in my gut as I thought about Kyle Hargrove, still out there, still unaware that his mother had just confessed to committing multiple felonies in his name. Something told me this wasn't over. The emergency HOA meeting was called for 7 p.m. on Tuesday, exactly 3 days after Denise's arrest. Under the CC&Rs, any homeowner could request an emergency meeting with 72 hours' notice if they could demonstrate urgent community concern affecting the welfare of residents. Yasa sentence ipsete. I'd filed the request Monday morning with signatures from 47 homeowners, more than enough to trigger the requirement. The meeting would be held at the Meadowbrook Estates Community Center, and attendance was mandatory for all board members. Denise's bail conditions allowed her to attend, though her attorneys had strongly advised against it. She came anyway. I watched her arrive at 6:50 p.m., walking into the community center with her head high, flanked by Douglas Kern. She was dressed impeccably again, navy suit, minimal jewelry, hair pulled back in a tight bun. She looked like she was preparing for battle, not surrender. The community center was packed. All 142 households had been notified. I counted at least 130 people in the room, the highest attendance in Meadowbrook Estates history, according to Walter Price. Rows of folding chairs faced a long table at the front where the HOA board normally sat. Tonight, that table held something different: a laptop connected to a large screen projector, a stack of documents, and a microphone. Lisa Monroe stood near the back wall in plain clothes, technically off-duty, but present as community observer. The energy in the room was electric, angry, curious, and hungry for answers. People were whispering, pointing at Denise, pulling out their phones to record. This wasn't just a meeting. This was a reckoning. Walter Price, acting as temporary board chair, called the meeting to order at 7 p.m. sharp. This emergency session has been called to address serious allegations regarding HOA governance, specifically actions taken by former board president Denise Hargrove. Mr. Trevor Hudson has requested the floor to present evidence of systematic abuse of authority. Mr. Hudson, you have the floor. I stood and walked to the front of the room. Every eye in the place followed me. I could feel the weight of their attention, their expectations. These were my neighbors, people who'd lived under Denise's authority for years, some of whom had suffered because of it, others who'd watched it happen and said nothing. Tonight, they would all see the truth. "Thank you, Walter," I said, my voice calm and clear. 3 days ago, Denise Hargrove hired 3 men to impersonate police officers and steal my vehicle because her son wanted it. Those men are now under arrest. Denise Hargrove is facing multiple felony charges, but this isn't just about my Jeep. This is about a pattern of abuse that's been happening in this community for 4 years. I clicked the remote, and the first image appeared on the screen behind me. It was a property map of Meadowbrook Estates with 14 addresses highlighted in red. These are the homes of 14 families who received escalating HOA violation notices between 2020 and 2024. Every single one sold within 6 months. 12 were purchased by Hargrove Properties LLC at 18% below market value. The room erupted in murmurs. I saw heads turning, people pointing at the screen, recognizing addresses. I clicked again. The Hendricks family. 7 violation notices in 4 months for things like unauthorized mailbox color. They sold in August 2021 for $215,000. Hargrove Properties bought it for $210,000, relisted 3 months later for $280,000. Another click. The Morrison family. 9 violations in 5 months, sold for $190,000. Hargrove Properties bought it for $185,000, relisted at $240,000. I went through 4 more examples, each one showing the same pattern. With each slide, the murmurs grew louder, angrier. People were standing now, some shouting questions, others just staring at Denise in disbelief. Then I played the dash cam footage. The room fell silent as they watched 3 men in fake police jackets trying to break into my Jeep. They heard Martinez say, "Mrs. Hargrove hired us to handle this." They watched the SWAT team storm out and make the arrests. When the video ended, the silence was absolute. I let it sit for 5 seconds. Denise Hargrove used her position as HOA president to target families, harass them with fake violations, force them to sell at a loss, and profit from their desperation. When I refused to be intimidated, she escalated to hiring fake cops. She has confessed to all of this on record. But before the courts decide her fate, I wanted you, her community, her neighbors, the people she was supposed to serve, to see exactly what she's been doing. I turned and looked directly at Denise. She was sitting perfectly still, her face pale, her hands gripping the edge of the table. Kern leaned over to whisper something to her, but she didn't respond. She was staring at the screen, at the faces of her neighbors, at the evidence of her own crimes laid bare. "Denise," I said quietly, my voice carrying in the silent room. "Do you have anything to say to these people?" For a long moment, she didn't move. Then, slowly, she stood. Kern tried to pull her back down, but she shook him off. She looked around the room at all the faces staring back at her, angry, betrayed, disgusted. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. "I thought I was protecting property values. I thought—" She trailed off, and for the first time, I saw shame. But the room wasn't interested in her explanations. Someone in the back shouted, "You're a thief!" Another voice, "You destroyed families." The room exploded. People were shouting, standing, demanding answers. Walter banged the gavel repeatedly, trying to restore order, but the dam had broken. Years of suppressed anger came pouring out all at once. Denise stood frozen, surrounded by the fury of the community she'd terrorized. Kern grabbed her arm and tried to pull her toward the exit, but the crowd had closed in, not threatening, just present, bearing witness, demanding accountability. Lisa Monroe stepped forward. "Everyone, please step back. Mrs. Hargrove is leaving now. She will face justice through proper legal channels, but this community has every right to remove her from authority immediately." Walter raised the gavel one more time. "All in favor of removing Denise Hargrove from the HOA board and stripping her of all community privileges, say aye." The response was deafening, 130 voices shouting aye in unison, not a single dissent. Walter brought the gavel down. "Motion carried unanimously. Denise Hargrove, you are no longer a member of this board or a recognized authority in this community. Leave now." Kern finally managed to guide Denise toward the door. She walked through the crowd in complete silence, eyes down, shoulders hunched. The woman who'd ruled Meadowbrook Estates like a tyrant for 5 years was being escorted out in disgrace. As the door closed behind her, the room erupted in applause. But I didn't join in. I was watching through the window as Denise got into her car, and I saw Kyle Hargrove sitting in the passenger seat, his face twisted with rage, staring directly at me. The legal proceedings moved faster than I expected. Within 2 weeks, Denise Hargrove accepted a plea deal, 3 years in federal prison for conspiracy to commit theft and impersonation of law enforcement, 5 years probation, and full restitution to the 14 families she'd defrauded. Hargrove Properties LLC was dissolved, and every property purchased through the scheme was reviewed by an independent audit. 8 families received settlements averaging $40,000 each compensation for the difference between what they were forced to sell for and the true market value. The 3 fake cops, Martinez and his crew, each got 18 months for impersonation and attempted theft. Kyle Hargrove was charged as an accessory after prosecutors found text messages on his phone showing he'd encouraged his mother and helped identify my Jeep as a target. He received 2 years probation and community service. Denise's real estate license was permanently revoked. The Meadowbrook Estates HOA underwent complete restructuring. Walter Price served as interim president while we held proper elections with actual campaigning, debates, and oversight. A new board was elected with term limits, mandatory financial audits, and a community ombudsman position to handle complaints. Every rule change now requires 30 days public notice and a majority vote of all homeowners, not just whoever shows up to meetings. The days of one person wielding unchecked authority were over for the first time in years. The neighborhood felt like an actual community instead of someone's personal kingdom. I kept the Jeep, obviously, parked it in the same spot on the street where this whole thing started. Nobody complained. In fact, neighbors would stop by sometimes just to admire it, ask about the restoration process, or thank me for standing up to Denise. Mrs. Kellerman brought me homemade cookies. The young couple who'd filmed the fake cop arrest invited me to their barbecue. One evening, about a month after the meeting, I was in my garage working on the Jeep's carburetor when Walter Price walked up my driveway. He was holding a large envelope. "Trevor, I wanted you to have this," he said, handing it over. Inside was a framed resolution signed by all 142 households in Meadowbrook Estates. It read, "In recognition of Trevor Hudson's courage, integrity, and commitment to justice. By standing firm against corruption and abuse of power, he reminded us that ordinary citizens have extraordinary power when they refuse to be intimidated. This community is stronger because of his example." I looked at Walter, genuinely moved. "I didn't do this for recognition. I just wanted my Jeep left alone." Walter smiled. "That's exactly why it mattered. You weren't trying to be a hero. You were just defending what was yours, using the system the right way: evidence, law, transparency. You showed everyone here that you don't have to accept injustice just because someone has a title." I hung the frame in my garage, right above my workbench, where I could see it while I worked. Not because I needed the validation, but because it reminded me why I'd done this. Justice isn't about revenge. It's not about destroying people or proving you're better. It's about restoring balance. It's about showing that power without accountability eventually collapses under its own weight. Denise Hargrove hadn't been brought down by violence or underhanded tactics. She'd been brought down by evidence, witnesses, public exposure, and a community that finally said enough. The system worked not because it was perfect, but because people used it correctly. I finished adjusting the carburetor and started the Jeep. It roared to life, smooth and powerful, exactly the way it was meant to run. I sat behind the wheel for a moment, listening to the engine, feeling the vibration through the steering wheel. This vehicle had become more than transportation. It was proof that when you build something with care, when you refuse to let bullies take what's yours, when you fight back using logic and law instead of emotion and chaos, you win. Not always easily, not always quickly, but eventually, inevitably, justice finds its way. I pulled out of the garage and drove through Meadowbrook Estates. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Neighbors waved as I passed. Kids played in yards without fear of violation notices. The community was healing, rebuilding itself on a foundation of transparency instead of tyranny. And somewhere across town, Denise Hargrove was preparing for her prison sentence, finally facing consequences for years of unchecked abuse. I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't feel vindication. I just felt balanced. The world was, for this moment, as it should be. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever faced an HOA tyrant or someone abusing small authority, remember this: you're not powerless. Document everything. Know your rights. Use the system correctly. And never, ever back down when you know you're right. That's how ordinary people defeat corruption, not with rage, but with receipts. This is Karma Clause, where justice isn't just served, it's documented, verified, and delivered with cold precision. If you believe accountability matters, hit that subscribe button, because every bully, every petty tyrant, every person who thinks they're above the law needs to know eventually the receipts come due.